The studio lights burned hot, casting sharp shadows across the sleek set of The Late Show. The audience, packed tight in their seats, buzzed with anticipation, their murmurs rising like a swarm of restless bees. Stephen Colbert, crisp in his tailored suit, sat behind his desk, his smile tight, his eyes glinting with something sharper than humor. Across from him, Elon Musk slouched in the guest chair, his posture casual but his gaze cold, like a predator sizing up prey. The air crackled with tension, a storm brewing before a single word was spoken. This wasn't just an interview. This was a battlefield, and both men knew it. The crowd's applause faded, and Colbert leaned forward, his voice smooth but laced with venom. "Elon, welcome. You've been busy, haven't you? Building rockets, digging tunnels, promising the moon." To anyone who'll listen, the audience chuckled, but it was uneasy, sensing the barb. Musk's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I deliver, Stephen. Unlike some people who just talk for a living." The crowd gasped, a few nervous laughs breaking the silence. Colbert's smile froze, his fingers tightening on his pen. "Oh, we're starting early, aren't we?" he shot back, his tone sharp enough to cut glass. The reason for their clash wasn't hard to guess. Weeks earlier, Colbert had aired a segment tearing into Musk's latest venture, a sprawling underground transport system called the Hyperloop. He'd called it a pipe dream for billionaires, mocking its cost and feasibility, questioning Musk's motives. "Is this for the public or just your ego?" he'd quipped to raucous applause. The clip went viral, and Musk, never one to ignore a slight, had stewed in silence. Now he'd accepted Colbert's invitation to appear, but not for pleasantries. He was here to settle a score, and Colbert, sensing blood, was ready to fight back. "You know, Elon," Colbert said, his voice dripping with mockery, "most people would test a project before promising it'll change the world, but I guess you're special." Musk's eyes narrowed, his voice low and dangerous. "And most hosts would do their homework before running their mouths. You didn't even read the Hyperloop plans, did you?" The audience oohed, the sound, like fuel on a fire. Colbert's face reddened, but he leaned closer, undeterred. "I read enough to know it's a fantasy. You're selling dreams you can't deliver, and people are tired of it." Musk shot up in his chair, his voice rising. "Tired? The only thing people are tired of is your cheap jokes and smug face." The crowd erupted, some cheering, others gasping. Colbert slammed his hand on the desk, his composure cracking. "You don't get to come on my show and insult me, Elon. You're a guest, not a king." Musk laughed, a harsh, biting sound. "Your show? This is a circus and you're the clown." The audience roared, the noise swallowing the set. Producers in the wings exchanged panicked glances, but neither man backed down. Colbert's eyes blazed as he stood, pointing at Musk. "You think you're untouchable because you've got money and a few toys in space? You're a fraud, and everyone here knows it." Musk stood too, towering over the desk, his voice a growl. "And you're a nobody who thinks he's clever because he's got a microphone. Keep talking, Stephen. See where it gets you." The crowd was on its feet, shouting, some for Musk, others for Colbert. The tension was a living thing, coiling tighter, ready to snap. This wasn't an interview anymore. It was war, and neither man was ready to surrender. As the chaos peaked, a commercial break was called, the lights dimming as the audience's noise lingered. Colbert and Musk stayed standing, glaring across the desk, their breaths heavy. The fight was far from over, and the next round promised to be even uglier. The studio lights flared back on, bathing the set in a harsh glow that did nothing to cool the fire between Stephen Colbert and Elon Musk. The audience, still buzzing from the explosive opening, leaned forward in their seats, their eyes darting between the two men. Colbert, now seated, adjusted his tie with a sharp tug, his jaw tight, his smile gone. Musk, back in his chair, leaned forward, elbows on his knees, his stare unrelenting. The commercial break had been a brief pause, but the war was still raging, and the air hummed with the promise of more bloodshed. Colbert broke the silence, his voice low, almost a hiss. "You know, Elon, I've had a lot of guests on this show, but none as arrogant as you. You think you can just waltz in here and tear me down?" Musk's lips curled into a sneer. "I'm not here to play nice, Stephen. You started this when you trashed my work on national television. You want to dish it out? Then take it." The crowd roared, some clapping, others shouting, feeding off the raw hostility. Colbert's eyes flashed, and he leaned across his desk, his voice rising. "I trashed your work because it's a joke. Your Hyperloop is a shiny toy for rich people, not a solution for the rest of us." Musk's laugh was sharp, cutting through the noise. "You wouldn't know a solution if it hit you in the face. You sit there, night after night, making fun of people who actually build things. What have you ever done, Stephen? Tell me." The audience gasped, the insult landing like a punch. Colbert's face twisted, his voice trembling with fury. "I've built a career holding people like you accountable. You think you're a genius, but you're just a loudmouth with too much money." Musk shot to his feet, pointing at Colbert. "And you're a coward hiding behind a desk. Say that to my face, not to your little audience." The crowd erupted, the noise deafening. Colbert stood too, his hands clenched into fists. "I'm saying it now, Elon. You're all talk, no substance. Your projects fail. Your promises fall apart, and you expect us to bow down anyway." Musk stepped closer, his voice a growl. "You want to talk failure? Look at your ratings. This shows a sinking ship, and you're the captain steering it down." The audience's reaction was a mix of cheers and boos, the room splitting into factions. Producers hovered off stage, whispering frantically, but no one dared interrupt. This was too raw, too real. Colbert's voice shook as he fired back. "You don't get to lecture me about success. I've earned my place here. You buy your way into everything, then act like it's talent." Musk's eyes narrowed, his tone icy. "Earned? You're a performer, Stephen. Nothing more. I'm changing the world while you're cracking jokes about it." The words stung, and Colbert's face flushed. He stepped around his desk, closing the distance between them. "Changing the world? You're wrecking it. Your tunnels, your rockets, they're just distractions from the mess you leave behind." Musk didn't back down, his voice rising to match Colbert's. "You're jealous, aren't you? That's what this is. You can't stand that I'm doing what you'll never even dream of." Colbert laughed, a harsh, bitter sound. "Jealous? Of you? I'd rather be me than a man who thinks he's God." The crowd was on its feet, shouting, the energy chaotic. The two men stood inches apart, their voices drowned out by the noise, but their hatred clear in every gesture. The set felt like it might combust, the tension so thick it choked the air. As the segment neared its end, a producer's voice cut through, calling for another break. The lights dimmed, but Colbert and Musk didn't move, locked in a silent standoff. The audience's cheers faded into a restless hum, their eyes glued to the stage. The fight had escalated, the insults cutting deeper, and the next round loomed like a gathering storm. Neither man was ready to yield, and the battle was only getting uglier. The studio lights snapped back on, their glare sharpening the edges of the set where Stephen Colbert and Elon Musk stood, still locked in a silent war of glares. The audience, restless and charged, barely settled as the cameras rolled again. The air was thick with the residue of their last clash, every word and insult still echoing in the room. Colbert, his face flushed with anger, stepped back behind his desk but didn't sit, his hands gripping the edge like a lifeline. Musk, towering and unyielding, crossed his arms, his smirk daring Colbert to strike again. The crowd sensed the escalation, their murmurs rising, hungry for the next blow. Colbert spoke first, his voice ablade, sharp and deliberate. "You know, Elon, I've met a lot of big egos, but yours could fill this studio. You think you're above everyone, don't you? Musk's eyes glinted, his tone mocking. And you think you're the people's hero, Stephen? You're a hypocrite, preaching from your ivory tower while you laugh at real progress. The audience gasped, some clapping, others shouting. Colbert's jaw tightened, his voice rising. Progress? You call bankrupting cities with your half-baked ideas progress? Your Hyperloop's a scam, and you know it. Musk stepped forward, his voice booming. A scam? I've done more for this planet than you'll ever understand. You're too busy playing court jester to see it. The crowd roared, split between cheers and boos. Colbert slammed his fist on the desk, his eyes blazing. Don't lecture me about the planet. You're the one strip mining it for your rockets and tunnels, then pretending it's for the greater good. Musk laughed, a cold, cutting sound. You're pathetic, Stephen. You attack what you can't comprehend because it makes you feel big. The insult landed hard, and Colbert's voice shook with rage. Feel big? I don't need to build a spaceship to prove my worth. You're the one chasing glory while the rest of us clean up your messes. Musk's smirk vanished, his tone turning venomous. My messes? You're the one poisoning people's minds with your smug little monologues. You're not a journalist, Stephen. You're a parasite. The audience erupted, the noise deafening, some chanting Musk's name, others rallying for Colbert. The set was a powder keg and every word was a spark. Colbert stepped out from behind his desk again, his voice low but fierce. You want to talk parasites? Look in the mirror, Elon. You take people's hope, their money, and give them nothing but broken promises. Musk closed the gap, his voice a growl. And you give them lies, wrapped in cheap laughs. You're a fraud, Stephen, and I'm done pretending you're anything else. The crowd was on its feet, screaming, the energy chaotic. Producers hovered in the wings, their faces pale, but the two men were beyond control, their hatred a living thing. Confrontation grew personal, each man digging deeper, unearthing old wounds. Colbert's voice cracked as he shouted, You think you're untouchable? But you're just a lonely man shouting into the void, desperate for someone to care. Musk's face twitched, a flicker of something raw crossing his features before. He fired back. And you're a washed-up comedian who's scared he's irrelevant. That's why you hate me, isn't it? I'm everything you'll never be. The words hung heavy, the audience falling silent for a moment, stunned by the brutality. As the segment hurtled toward another break, the tension was unbearable, the room pulsing with raw emotion. Colbert and Musk stood close, their breaths heavy, their eyes locked in a battle neither would concede. The lights dimmed, the crowd's noise swelling again, a mix of awe and disbelief. The fight had stripped away their masks, exposing vulnerabilities neither wanted to show. The next round loomed, promising a reckoning that would shake the stage to its core. The studio lights blazed once more, illuminating the raw hostility that clung to the set like smoke. Stephen Colbert and Elon Musk stood frozen in their standoff, the weight of their last exchange still heavy in the air. The audience, now a restless sea of whispers and shouts, could feel the fight teetering on a knife's edge. Colbert's face was taut, his eyes burning with a mix of fury and something deeper, a wound laid bare. Musk, his jaw clenched, radiated defiance, but his earlier smirk was gone, replaced by a grim intensity. The crowd waited, breathless, as the cameras rolled, knowing this clash was nearing its breaking point. Colbert spoke first, his voice low, trembling with barely contained rage. You think you can come here, Elon, and tear me apart because I called out your nonsense? You're not a hero. You're a bully. Musk's eyes narrowed, his tone icy. And you're a vulture, Stephen, picking at people's work because you've got nothing of your own to show. The audience gasped, the insult cutting deep. Colbert's hand shook as he pointed at Musk. Nothing? I've spent years giving people truth while you sell them fantasies that crumble. You're a con man, plain and simple. Musk stepped closer, his voice rising, sharp and unrelenting. Truth? You twist everything to fit your little narrative. You're not exposing me, Stephen. You're exposing yourself as a jealous, bitter man. The crowd erupted, some cheering Musk's audacity, others shouting for Colbert to fight back. Colbert's face flushed, his voice cracking with emotion. Jealous? I'm ashamed, Elon. Ashamed that people buy your act while you leave chaos in your wake. Musk's laugh was harsh, almost cruel. Chaos? I build the future. You just whine about it. The confrontation grew fiercer, each man striking at the other's core. Colbert's voice shook as he leaned forward. You talk about the future, but what about the people you step on to get there? Your workers? Your investors? The towns your projects ruin? You don't care, do you? Musk's eyes flashed, his voice a growl. Don't pretend you care about people, Stephen. You use them for applause, then forget them. At least I'm trying to fix things. The audience's noise swelled, split between loyalty to Colbert's passion and awe at Musk's defiance. Colbert's voice dropped, almost a whisper, but it carried a stinging edge. Fix things? You break everything you touch, Elon. Your dreams are nightmares for everyone else. Musk's face tightened, a flicker of doubt crossing his features before he snapped back. And your words are poison, Stephen. You tear down what you can't understand because you're too small to dream big. The crowd was on its feet, roaring, the energy electric. The two men were inches apart, their voices drowned out by the chaos, but their hatred clear in every tense muscle. The fight took a darker turn as Colbert's voice broke, raw with emotion. You think you're invincible, but you're alone, Elon. No one trusts you, not really. That's why you're so angry. Musk's expression faltered, the words hitting a nerve, but he recovered fast, his voice venomous. And you're scared, Stephen. Scared your time's up, that no one will remember you. That's why you're fighting so hard. The audience fell silent for a moment, stunned by the personal blows, the vulnerability exposed in both men. As the segment neared its end, the tension was suffocating, the room pulsing with the weight of their words. Producers signaled for a final break, but Colbert and Musk didn't move, their eyes locked, their breaths heavy. The crowd's noise surged again, a mix of shock and anticipation. The fight had laid bare their deepest fears and failures, and the final round loomed, promising a resolution that would either break them or set one free. The stage was set for a reckoning, and neither man was backing down. Stephen Colbert and Elon Musk stood locked in their silent duel, the air heavy with the wounds they'd inflicted. The audience, now a restless tide of gasps and murmurs, sensed the end was near, their eyes glued to the two men. Colbert's face was a mask of fury and resolve, his hands steady despite the storm inside him. Musk, his posture rigid, stared back with a mix of defiance and something softer, a crack in his armor. The crowd held its breath as the cameras rolled, knowing this was the moment the war would end. Colbert broke the silence, his voice calm but cutting, each word deliberate. You've said your piece, Elon. You've insulted me, my work, my life. But you can't hide from the truth. Your hyperloop, your grand plans, they're built on promises you can't keep. Musk's eyes flashed, but his voice was steady, almost quiet. And you've done the same, Stephen. You call me a fraud, but you're selling outrage disguised as truth. You're no better than me. The audience stirred, the words landing like a shared confession, raw and unexpected. Colbert stepped forward, his voice rising, firm but not cruel. Maybe I'm not perfect, but I don't pretend to be a savior. You make people believe you're their future, then leave them with nothing. That's why I called you out. Musk's jaw tightened, but he didn't interrupt, his silence a rare concession. Colbert pressed on, his tone softer, almost pleading. You could do so much good, Elon, but you let your ego ruin it. Why can't you see that? The crowd was silent, stunned by the shift, the vulnerability in Colbert's words. Musk's face softened just for a moment before he spoke, his voice low but fierce. You think I don't see my flaws? I fight for what I believe in, Stephen. Even when it's messy. You attack me for trying, but what do you fight for? Applause? The audience gasped, but Colbert didn't flinch. Instead, he nodded, a small, reluctant gesture. Maybe I've leaned on the laughs too much, but I fight to keep people like you honest. Someone has to. The admission hung between them, a bridge over the chasm of their hatred. The tension eased, but the fire wasn't gone. Musk stepped closer, his voice steady. Then do it without tearing me down. I'm not your enemy, Stephen. I'm just a man who wants to leave something better behind. Colbert met his gaze, his voice firm but not angry. And I'm just a man who wants you to mean it. Prove me wrong, Elon. Build something that lasts. The crowd erupted, not in chaos but in awe, their cheers a release of the night's pent-up emotion. The two men stood, not friends but no longer foes, their battle ending in a hard-won truce. Colbert extended a hand, his expression wary but sincere. No more cheap shots. Deal? Musk hesitated, then gripped his hand, his nod curt but real. Deal. No more lies. The audience roared, their applause shaking the set, a wave of relief and triumph. The lights dimmed, but the energy lingered, the crowd on its feet, chanting both names. Producers rushed the stage, beaming as the show closed. The war resolved in a moment of raw human connection. As the cameras cut, Colbert and Musk stepped back, their faces tired but lighter, the weight of their fight lifted. The audience filed out, buzzing with the story they'd witnessed, a clash that had ended not in destruction, but in understanding. Colbert had held his ground, forcing Musk to face his flaws. Musk had stood tall, challenging Colbert to rise above his own. Together they'd forged a moment of truth, a triumph neither could claim alone. The stage was quiet, the battle over, and the world felt a little less divided.